What is up, hotties? Welcome back to another episode of Stay Hot. I'm Blaiden Kirk, joined as always by my two favorite co-hosts of all time, Matthew Sponhour and Theo Ash. And today, we've got a lot to talk about. There was obviously the college football playoff first round games that were wonderful and amazing. Then we have to talk about the current week of NFL football. We have a few things that we want to touch on there, mostly some things that shook up in the NFC West. Got to talk about the Eagles, got to talk about the Ravens. But before we get into all of that, or if you guys just want to get into it, we can. But normally I like to ask you guys how you're doing on this beautiful Sunday night.
I'm doing well. I was bird watching before the games today, and I saw a golden eagle, which is a good bird, and it's a bird that I don't even need to explain. Like if I saw a bird like the one I saw a few days ago, which was probably even more rare, which was the white-winged scoter, no one knows what that means. But if I can say I saw the golden eagle, I think everybody understands the gravity of that situation immediately. That sounds like some perk that would be, or some character that would be in like Fortnite or something, like, bro, the golden eagle is coming to the island or something like that. So it was a good bird. It was an epic sight. Like I saw it at the bottom of a canyon and it worked its way kind of up. And so you really got some money views of it from like above and below and like from the side, just all angles of the.
Did you get a picture?
I didn't. I could have pointed my phone through the binoculars and tried to hit a moving target eagle soaring above me, but there's just no way that was going to be a
Well, I never know if
picture
it's
worth
like
seeing.
When you're bird watching, if you always have like a camera with you that you're like trying to get shots, or if you're just sometimes going just to watch.
Usually I'm just going with binoculars and going to watch. I've got a plan before I go. Like I knew that the golden eagle lived in this canyon, so I went with my like ID notes and my binoculars and just went to try to see him.
There you go. That's cool, man. Matt, how you doing?
I saw 2 golden eagles today, but I'll keep it to myself so Theo doesn't get jealous.
Nonchalant.
No, that's super dope though, man.
That didn't sound like you meant.
No, it is cool. I'm just fooling around, man. Obviously, I've been thinking about the playoffs a lot today. It was a good win for Ohio State. It was close. Unexpected, I won't lie. I didn't think they'd come out like that at all. So that was exciting. And most of my mood is dependent on that. So, sweet.
Yeah. The Buckeyes won. The Panthers won. What could be better for Matthew Sponhour right now?
Not much. Well, maybe some consistency in the way that we talk about the playoffs. I actually have gotten mad about something within the last 20 minutes. Before we get into the actual games, in the last 20 minutes, I've had this epiphany. I was watching this Joel Klatt TikTok, and he was talking about how...
Joel Klatt was on TikTok.
Yeah, it's just like podcast clips. But he was talking about how... And he tweeted out about it, too, where it was like college football average margin, like in the first round, and it was like 20 points. And then like NFL average margin in the first round, it was like 18 points. Now... That's something that I disagree with. Like, oh, it's the same. You wouldn't say that the NFL it needs to shrink their playoffs, right? And the NFL doesn't really need to shrink their playoffs. But I'll even ignore the fact that like college football expanding its playoffs has more of an effect on a regular season that doesn't have as much parity as the NFL's does, and that's why it's different. What bothers me about that is that, and what bothers me about this whole discussion around these blowouts is like, I agree that just because a team got blown out, just because a team had a tough game, doesn't mean that they didn't deserve to be in the playoffs. At the end of the day, if you do what you need to do in the regular season to build up a resume that gets you in that top 12, then you deserve to be there regardless of what the results are in the playoffs. And no matter what we do, there's always going to be a blowout. It's always going to happen. And the 13th seed will always be able to complain. I thought when we went to 12, we were all coming together and saying, hey, at this point, like, if we get left out, it's on us. But clearly that hasn't happened at all. However, as much as I think it's annoying, the people complaining, and as hilarious as I thought it was that the SEC did this can't possibly happen to us, and then of course it happened to them later that night after they had spent the entire day complaining about it, I will say, last year, Florida State, what did they do? They went 13-0. They won the ACC. They built up a resume worthy of being in the playoffs, and the committee said, yes, but I'm sorry, you're going to get blown out. And for that reason, we're going to have to leave you out, even though your resume earned you a spot. This year, yeah, there's teams getting blown out in the first round, but you have to understand, their resume earned them their spot, so it's okay. That is not only hypocritical, it is completely changing what your criteria is. They say the best, but then they go off of mostly resume. It's impossible to tell what the committee is going to do year to year. And when last year you support Florida State, like I'm almost certain Joel Klatt did, if I'm remembering correctly, then you can't turn around and be like, what's up with all of these SEC fans who are now thinking that like they're better than a team and they just deserve to be in because they got blown out. Specifically, we were told if you got blown out, that was a good reason to keep you out. Now it's the opposite. That doesn't make any sense, and it's incredibly frustrating to see, to see that.
This Klatt tweet is one of the dumbest things I have ever seen. First of all,
I can't stand it.
He says the 2023 NFL wildcard playoffs had an average margin of 17.3. The 24 college football playoff first round average margin 19.2. Should we blow up the NFL playoffs as well? That's the tweet. And the first round of the last year's NFL wildcard was not good. Definitely. There were a lot of blowouts. Yeah. However, one of those blowouts was the 7-seed Packers beating the 2-seed Cowboys.
That's
which
a good point.
Exciting and upset. It had never happened before since they expanded to 7 seeds. So finally, the 7 seed gets a win. Like automatically, that is more than we saw from the first round of the college football playoff. And at least there were a lot of blowouts, but you just didn't know what was going to happen. The 11-6 Browns got blown out by the 10-7 Texans. The 11-6 Eagles got blown out by the 9-8 Buccaneers. You know what I mean? So even there, here going into the playoffs, most of the favorites were touchdown favorites. Ohio State was a touchdown favorite versus Tennessee. Notre Dame, Penn State, they were touchdown favorites over their opponents, right? And what happened? They blew them out. So
they all covered every single
on its face, like even with a bad first round in last year's NFL playoff, it still got more intrigue and question than the first round of the college football playoff. And I mean, the sample size is tiny here. Okay, the 2023 NFL wildcard round wasn't very good. How about the rest? If you averaged out all the wildcard rounds, it's not usually like that. Meanwhile,
that's a great. After this podcast, I'll go and look that up.
Look it up,
and I'll quote tweet that tweet. Absolutely, I'll do it.
And I tweeted it out yesterday. The average first round, since they expanded to 4 teams, the average margin is 17.9 points for college football. That's since they expanded to 4 in 2014. 17.9 points. That's worse than the average margin of last year's wild card. So even when they expanded up from 2 teams in the college football playoff, the games have been blowouts. All right, there has not been a lot of close matchups. Now, I think some of those have been what I'm describing with Packers Cowboys, where maybe like the 4 seed beats the 1 or the 3 seed beats the 2 or something like that. So, maybe some of those weren't expected blowouts, and that's a little bit more maybe interesting. I mean, not really when you're watching
honestly,
the game.
I'm trying to think off the top of my head when a blowout has happened in the playoffs where it was the underdog blowing out the heavy favorite.
Yeah, maybe I'm making that up and it doesn't happen.
Ohio State against Oregon, maybe.
Maybe that's not a bad call. I don't know what the line on that game would have been.
I have no idea. I mean, Ohio State definitely wouldn't have been favored going into the Bama game. I will say the 2022 NFL playoffs, we had the Jaguars coming back to beat the Chargers 31-30. Right, there was that game. There was the Bills beat the Dolphins by 3 points. The Vikings lost to the Giants by 7. The Ravens lost to the Bengals by 7. The only games that were kind of blowouts were the 49ers and the Cowboys winning by, looks like 18 and 17 respectively.
Yeah, and it's a completely bad faith tweet by Joel Klatt. I mean, he's acting dumb on purpose. Like that logic makes no sense. Those stats, those two stats that he presented are completely, spun. It's really bad. And here's the thing about the college football. There's never going to be a lot of parity. All right. If you are Georgia and you've got a couple holes on your roster, you're like, man, we need a right guard and we need a wide receiver and we need safety. We need those three positions. What can you go out and do? You can go get the top 3 players available at those positions every single year for the eternity of your entire dynastic run. All right. Every single year you can have like the most talented prospects or the best proven players come and fill those spots. All right. That's not something SMU can go do every single year. There's always going to be these dominant top dogs. It's a purely capitalistic sport in the way that it works. If you have resources, there is no cap on the amount of resources that you can spend to make your team better. And the better you are, the resources grow exponentially. It's not linear from like the bottom to the top where like everybody just gets a little bit better. Everybody just gets a little bit better. And then you get to the Oregons, the Alabamas, the Georgias, and then it really skyrockets. So it just, the NFL has parity every year because the worse you are, the better resources you get. You probably have more cap space unless you're really bad at your job. You definitely have more draft capital unless you're really bad at your job. Sorry, Matt, for the Panthers. But usually you get more and more resources to build your team up the worse that you are. And that's why there's parity in the league. That's why 7 seeds beat 2 seeds sometimes, or at least it happened last year. Even then, that was the first time it's ever happened. So even then, a 7 seed like struggles to beat a 2 seed most of the time. And maybe the NFL playoffs shouldn't have expanded. Maybe we should shrink them because of that. But we should shrink the college football playoff, man. There's just not 12 teams that can contend for a national championship. Realistically, I don't think it can happen. I think we've seen for over a decade now that this format and expanding it leads to blowouts, leads to bad football games being played, whereas a bowl format put 2 evenly matched teams kind of against each other.
It's easier to create good matchups. You can know exactly what the spread would be. You could have as many close ones as you want. The disconnect here is that people think that the bowl games never mattered. I think really a lot of people have convinced themselves of that.
I love this I keep getting these comments, dude. It's like, well, bowl games never matter. I am convinced we are arguing with people that have only been watching college football since like 2016.
I mean, I was barely old enough to know that the bowl games used to matter myself. Although I feel like my first strong football memory is Ohio State beating Oregon in the Rose Bowl. And I was 9 and we had a big Ohio State flag and I went and waved it out in front of my yard. South Carolina.
I have an Ohio State
and I got to
Fiesta Bowl Santa hat in my living room.
This stuff, like it used to mean something, but I had somebody, because I was tweeting about this today, like somebody asked me like, why do you hate the playoffs? And I explained it and I said, well, and then of course they were like, well, more games had meaning like this and this and this. And I'm like, well, those games still would have had meaning because they would have been for BCS bowls and those were important. So you don't take away like the end season, like you need to go on a crazy run, even if you're a top dog. Stakes, and one game can cost you stakes while also still giving teams that lose a game or two something like really worth playing for to play for. But people are like, well, players, they opt out of those bowl games. And it's like, yeah, that happened because of the playoffs. It's the playoffs that did that.
Yes.
And I mean, even someone like Klatt, who is pro expansion, a lot of his argument was that, well, we need to go from 4 to 12 because the bowl games now don't matter once you have a playoff, which I'll admit that is true. The bowl games don't matter once even a 4 team, even the BCS bowls mean nothing the second that you go to the New Year's Six or whatever. But it's a shame. I still think like college football is really great. There's some ways that you can like over exaggerate how bad things are, but it's definitely like it's in my opinion, it's worse. And I saw somebody on Twitter the other day talking about like, what if it was 24 teams, which seems very far off because we know in 2026 it's almost certainly going to be 14. It's looking like, but if it went to 24, it would genuinely like. It would make the sport significantly worse compared to where it was in like 2010. It's just the truth.
I think so. I think so.
The bowl games being so diminished by the fact that they're just playoff games now, right? Like the big bowl games, the Rose Bowl, the Cotton Bowl, the Orange Bowl, they're just playoffs. They're stepping stones to getting to the national title, and that sucks. And so those games now don't mean anything, and then the more meaningless bowl games now really mean nothing. I don't
think the playoff games themselves don't mean anything. Bowls just don't matter.
Yeah.
Right. It's like winning. It's like it was again like the point I was trying to make like a couple episodes ago. It's like winning a bowl game in the playoff format doesn't carry the same punch that it did. Like you're not excited because you won a bowl game. You're excited because you're moving further on in the playoffs. And I think that's lame.
And overall, I'm just incredibly frustrated because I've spent I've probably talked more about this than literally anything else probably ever in my whole life. and I'm just like super annoying on my second account on TikTok and all of that stuff. And then I see people who are supporting the 12-team playoff like turn heel on it in like 2 games. And that just makes me so mad that it's like there's no way, man, that we couldn't know that certain things were going to be a problem beforehand because we did. And now it's like, it's too late. And it's like, sorry, like too late to realize this.
This is the shitty thing is that we can't go back to a BCS. This is something that I realized like earlier. It is done. If we were to go back to a BCS now, the bowl games would still be seen as meaningless to a lot of people.
I don't think so. I actually think I think you would get it back.
Really?
I don't see why not.
I don't know. I think it might take a while.
It might take a year or 2. It would matter though. I do.
I think the damage might be a little too far done, but it's possible, I suppose.
I mean, everybody wants a playoff, even when it was BCS before. Like the playoffs happened for a reason, and it's the pinnacle of American sports, right? No one would want it to just go straight to the Super Bowl. No one would want it to go straight to the NBA Finals. Like you want a bracket, you want a playoff. I understand wanting those things. It's just when these games just are blowouts over and over and over again, you start to realize why it wasn't a playoff in the first place.
It worked the way that it did for a long time for a reason. Everybody talked about it like, oh, it was just so obvious to go to 12. It wasn't. It wasn't obvious to have a playoff. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to like the pre-playoff more than the playoff itself. Like you're free to your own opinion, but the number of people who it's like, there's just no reasoning behind it being bowl games and even a picked national champion for a long time, although I think playing a game is better. Like it didn't work like that for no reason. And the reason why they excluded certain things or were fine, like leaving out certain, maybe even undefeated teams from tough conferences, the reason why that worked is like, it's cooked in a little bit. So it was a frustrating day. There will be better round ones though, and there will be better games.
Round 2 has a chance to be pretty good. Like I think ASU isn't going to like roll over.
If ASU can fight and maybe Ginty can really get going. Notre Dame, I'm a little worried that Notre Dame, Georgia is going to be ugly, but it could be close. And Ohio State, Oregon should be the best game of the season. Like, hopefully it should be the best game of the season. That's the idea.
Unless Ohio State gets in their head and gets blown out.
We'll see.
I think the second round, and I like kind of the wrinkle that like these kind of weird teams have buys. Like, I don't think anybody on the committee going into the playoff was like, oh, ASU's a better team than Texas, but ASU has the bye. Or no one thought Boise's a better team than Ohio State, like really. But Boise has the bye. And I think that the fact that there are some kind of smaller programs that so easily get bye access it negates the break advantage that big teams consistently get in these college football playoffs. I mean, to me, that's one of the biggest deals and why these teams or these games are always blowouts is like Saban's Alabama gets 3 weeks to game plan,
Yes,
however long
absolutely.
it was, and get healthy. So most of these games are happening like full strength on full strength, so much time to practice on so much time to practice, and it just takes kind of the chaos and the odds of an upset out. This time around, I mean, it's the, ASU has the time advantage and the wear and tear advantage over a team like Texas. Does that mean they'll beat Texas? I have no idea, but
What is the line on that game?
That has been, kind of turned on its head, which I like. So not every first round will be this bad. I have hope that the second round can be pretty good. And like from here on out, like maybe we get some banger games and a banger national championship. And overall the playoff goes down as like, hey, that wasn't actually too bad. We got some great moments. So I'm hopeful that can still go down. But at the same time, I know the average margin in these games, and it might be Boise State 0, Penn State like 70. Like that
I'm worried about
mind.
Boise when it's like Ginty ran for like 200, and I think he had like 6 yards a carry against UNLV, and it was like 21-7. I was like, it's like if you can hold them to 21, and Ginty can go for 200, and you're UNLV. And it's like they're going to go up against Penn State. I mean, every game is different, but like that's not an amazing sign. I will hit you with the truth snipe here. It's Texas -14 right now.
Yeah. Wow, it's that big. So ASU might not even keep it close. I mean, that's definitely a possibility as well. I love my Sun Devils, and I think Kenny Dillingham is not the guy I'd want to go up against in a playoff format. I think he might be able to outcoach somebody. But yeah, there is a huge talent advantage, and Jordan Tyson, our best weapon, is out. So it could just be. But that's just such a disheartening number that it would ever get to that point in the second round of a playoff game. It just goes to show why the college football playoffs are inherently so flawed. I mean, look at the. Go ahead, Matt.
I mean, did you have a -14 game in the NFL in the regular season today? Maybe. No. I honestly don't know. It happens. It happens, but it's like once every couple of weeks in the regular season, not second round of the playoffs. You're getting a game like that. For the record, -14 for that game. Penn State -10.5 against Boise. And then the other two are 1.5 point spreads, which I agree with.
And Ohio State's favored in the Oregon game.
They are.
We'll see.
We'll see.
But that's another thing like Klatt ignores in his dumbass tweet where he's like, well, the 2023 NFL playoffs, they had a big margin of victory. How about look at your own playoffs right now and the fact that there's a real chance half the games in the second round are absolute, they're expected to be 2-score blowouts. What was the point of expanding if that's the line? All right, just answer that question, right?
Yeah.
It's bad. I mean, the other super free market sport where the top teams get to sign whoever they want is soccer. And I know in the Premier League, I don't even think they have a playoff. It just whoever's at the top of the table at the end just wins the Premier League.
It can be done. You can have a non-playoff focused sport. It exists. But so many people are just locked into well, the NFL works like this, so the college football has to.
College football should work like that. And everybody loves the NFL.
It's just different. It's just different. Yeah. And what frustrates, it's the college could never be the NFL, and it shouldn't want to be the NFL. It should want to be college football.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
It's too different.
So many sports leagues just bloat themselves as much as possible, and it's a shame.
They look at the stranglehold NFL has on the ratings and the stranglehold it has on, just pretty much the ratings, I would say, and they want what that is.
We talked in our group chat why they have great ratings. It's because their parody's good. It's just.
And if you're not willing to make your league more socialist in structure in terms of making things better for the worst, the worst of its, members, then If you're not willing to do that, you're never going to have NFL type of results because your parity is going to be off.
It's a number of games thing too. I think if the NFL could bump it to 82 games, they'd already be at it. You know, this would have happened a long time ago. And probably the same with, like, if college basketball could manage to do a bunch of big bloated series in the playoffs, it would probably do that as well. It just doesn't quite like work logistically for either of those sports. Mm-hmm. So we happen to get the two most probably loved North American sporting events in the NFL and March Madness. And I wish more sports would take a lesson and say, look, I love this sport as a whole, but the structure of the league could actually benefit from maybe trimming some fat in certain areas and working to create more parity. You look at like baseball, and it's got a big problem with both of those. Although baseball is kind of a whole different thing, and I like baseball for what it is. But you look at a sport like that, and it's like it just can't match what the NFL is doing with how it's structured. Like it just doesn't work.
So you shouldn't try. You do your own thing. You know, do your own thing.
Be your own sport, you know, it is what it is. But
okay, well, we've cried for 25 minutes. We can talk about the actual games themselves. I will say some of them were less interesting than others. Start with Notre Dame, Indiana. We can get through these kind of quick because we want to talk about the NFL too, and these weren't great games. Notre Dame, Indiana. It felt a lot like Cincinnati versus Alabama to me, which had some people on Twitter taking that the wrong way as like me bashing Cincinnati, and it wasn't. It felt like Indiana was holding up defensively, like almost good enough so where if like every big play broke their way, they could have won it, but you were probably never going to get that reality. And then it's like they throw a pick that they can't afford, and they let up a big run that they can't afford. But outside of that, their run defense held up okay. They ended up making it kind of like phony close at the end. But Notre Dame is a very good team. I think they've got a very good chance to beat Georgia. I regret picking against them. I think there's a really good chance they could be in the national title. And honestly, if I was a Notre Dame fan, I would be looking at our path. I'd say, yeah, Georgia's tough, but they are down their quarterback, and they're very vulnerable. They're a great team. We're not some heavy favorite, but they're very vulnerable. And Penn State, also a very good team, but like that's totally beatable. There's some years where you're going to match up against like a true juggernaut, like somebody who is just absolutely firing on all cylinders. This year's not that. It really feels like if you want to go on a run, if you want to get hot, you could do it if you're Notre Dame. And same thing goes for Penn State, really. If you want to get on a run and get hot and be in a national title game, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. I felt bad for Jennings in the SMU Penn State game, though. I also almost like, damn, if they didn't throw 3 terrible interceptions early, they could have been like in that game a little bit more than they were, and they just
played bad.
Yeah, they played. The problem is that they did play bad, but it felt like there was a world where they could have held up. It's just we lived in. Although, you know, the physicality probably forced a lot of those bad turnovers, so I don't know if I should say that. But then they also had plays where it's like you missed a throw on what should have been an easy touchdown on a 4th and 1 where you could have run for it. It's like that type of stuff is just a backbreaker, you know?
Watching the ACC championship game, it was pretty clear that neither of those teams was going to do particularly well, especially SMU with the way Jennings played. Like this guy is a total wild card on what he's going to do on any given play. And when you take that and you put it up against an NFL front four, which Penn State has, it's probably going to result in a lot more bad than good.
I think that's fair.
Honestly, I did not watch much of the first round. Like the way it worked out, Notre Dame, Indiana, I watched, but then the Saturday games happened on the same day that there were 2 NFL football games, which somehow were a lot better than the college football playoff games. Someone paging Mr. Klatt. Explain that. I saw them head to head on the same day.
This needs to be titled Joel Klatt Hate Watch.
Joel Klatt, come outside.
Regardless, we should talk about Ohio State real quick. They were a total wild card as well, and they came out and played absolutely their best game. And it was nice to see that they kind of learned their lesson from the Michigan game. As frustrating as it is that they didn't just do this last week, they had to come out and be aggressive and put faith in Howard. They're not going to be able to consistently go and run the ball. But if they say, we're going to air it out, we're going to attack down the field, and we're going to live with maybe a bad play or two because we know that over the course of a game, we can make up for it with the guys that we have on the other end receiving, that we can go and win a lot of games, especially with our defense and how good it's playing. But in this one, Howard, who's a wild card, didn't even have really the bad mistakes. He had that one interception that I don't think was quite an interception and was DPI, and it's like that wasn't on him. But he was playing fantastic. And then once they started to air it out and they were hitting Jeremiah Smith, who is unbelievably good. Jeremiah Smith being a true freshman, and he's going to put up like 1,100, 1,200 yards on a stacked receiving core on a team that was like trying not to throw it that much. I mean, imagine if he played for like a team with a bad defense and a great quarterback, what his numbers would be. They'd be historically good for a true freshman. So once they did that, though, their run game opens up a little bit more. It's the other way for Ohio State, and I think that's overall the truth for a lot of teams. You don't necessarily set up the run with the pass or set up the pass with the run. You use your strength to make the other team respect that, and then take advantage of them having to respect that by hitting them with the counterpunch. Ohio State learned that the run game is gonna be a counterpunch for them. Sorry, you had two great offensive linemen go down and your depth is really not that great. That's the reality that you live in. But you can adjust to it and still be good. Whether or not they're going to beat Oregon, I still have my doubts. Them being favorites when I kind of still think that they're a worse team now than they were when they played them the first time because the run game has taken a step back makes me nervous. But a lot of it just comes down to what version of Howard do we get. If he has like 2 to 3 back-breaking plays, they're not going to beat him. And I think Dylan Gabriel, as like a veteran quarterback who maybe isn't an NFL guy, but lives and is super effective off of just making the right decision and being calm and being quick-witted, I think he's set up to deal with an Ohio State, defense that has adjusted more to being blitz heavy. But if you get a good Howard game, like there's no reason OSU shouldn't be right in. And like I said, this should be a great, great game. And I think it being neutral site does help Ohio State compared to last year. However, or not last year, but last game. However, it does feel like if it's close and Ohio State is kicking like they're kicking, that will cost them again, and it will be the most agonizing, frustrating way for them to go out possible. But I also thought the last game would be close, so we'll see.
I mean, the game against the Volunteers was kind of like a neutral site game with how much orange was in that stadium, man. I thought about going to this game. I'm glad I didn't because it ended up being a blowout. But it would have been like a cool atmosphere. But like
it would have been cool. It's cool when your team blows out another team.
Yeah, but it's like it's freezing cold, but like I wasn't gonna drive it. I was gonna walk, and because it's like a 30-minute walk from my house to the stadium. So I was like, is it really worth walking 30 minutes there, 30 minutes back? Like, how hammered would I have to be for this to be worth it?
Yeah, it would. I mean, it's cold as you got to really be committed to go into it. I've been to a couple like that.
I would do it for a Browns.
They're better than the hot games. I will say that.
I disagree.
This is one of those things where you can bundle up more than you can take off. Like, I'll give it to you in this circumstance for sure. But I've been to games like that where it's not a playoff game. It's like Indiana, back when Indiana wasn't Indiana, of course.
As long as it's not raining, you can tough through the cold.
You can deal with snow much more than you can deal with rain.
Yes.
In a situation like that.
A cold rain game in a stadium sucks.
Yeah.
One last thing before we get to the NFL. What did you guys think about the whole Tennessee fans situation? Did you guys see much of this on Twitter, or is it just feeding? Or is the algorithm just feeding things to me that makes me mad?
I saw that they were like when the Ohio State players were like entering the stadium, there were like a bunch of like Tennessee fans there instead of Ohio State fans. It was a lot. I honestly like Tennessee fans are like really talking trash, which you expect.
I didn't personally join in any of the talking back or anything, but I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. It was particularly like college football can be brutal, man, because they were talking major trash. They really showed up. Give them credit. And then, I mean, they had probably the worst possible outcome. It does not get any more brutal than that.
My take on that is I respect the Tennessee fan base, but I didn't see much of it.
I kind of do as well. It's like I have mixed feelings. On the one hand, like respect, honestly. Like there's probably not a good fan base that wouldn't do the same. However, when you're drawing up the path on Google Maps for where you're going to take the goalpost after you win so you can dump them in the river, it's like, dude, you're kind of setting yourself up there a little bit.
I think those accounts were Ryan Day burner accounts to create a common enemy for the Ohio State fan base that wasn't him. Because I think the Tennessee fans were being so over the top that Ohio State fans forgot how much they hated their own team and started to actually feel some good vibes again. So I think it may have been the AD of Ohio State or maybe Ryan Day himself, like manufacturing an enemy online to take some of the heat off themselves or maybe motivate the team to play better.
I did see a TikTok of Volunteers fans that were like on a private jet headed to the game. And they were just like dancing on their private jet, all dressed in Tennessee gear. And then after they lost, they made a follow-up video of them dancing on their private jet because they own a private jet. They're like, honestly, we don't give a shit. Like, we're rich. Like, who? I'm like, you know what?
See, but if you don't care that your team loses because you're rich, then it won't truly mean something to you when they win. So maybe, really, they're cheating themselves out of a great joy.
You need to get.
You have to take the lows for the highs to matter. We all know this.
Poor to really appreciate.
You don't necessarily have to be poor, but you do have to, like, if you're just like, I don't give a fuck, then I believe you won't really truly give a fuck the other way.
You've got to take that jet and fly it into Ohio State's horseshoe after you lose.
I also I want to shout out Jack Sawyer for having a great game. I felt bad for him after the Michigan game. I know a lot of people are like, he's kind of a baby, but he made what should have been like the legendary saving play to beat Michigan, and then the offense let him down. And he's somebody where he's been talented, but the production hasn't matched up. And recently it really has. And that could be a game changer for OSU if it continues. So he's going out there and picking himself back up, and the whole team's picking themselves back up, which it was far from a guarantee. You know, it seems like it now because they did win, 42-10 or 42-17 or whatever, but it wasn't. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I was impressed.
They definitely could have folded and they didn't. But I want to talk about the NFL.
So do I. If you're like me, always looking for an edge in sports betting, then you know how important it is to have the right strategy. So when I heard that Masterclass had a class on beating the odds, taught by the pros who've made millions, I had to check it out. It's exactly what I needed to level up my game. With Masterclass, you can learn from the best to become your best. The platform has over 200 classes from some of the world's most successful professionals, and for just $10 a month, you get access to every class from high-stakes sports betting to mastering data-driven strategies. Masterclass is available on your phone, your computer, or even on your TV. And for those looking to sharpen their betting skills, these classes are a game changer. Forget relying on lucky jerseys. Learn how the pros manage risk, evaluate data, and make tactical decisions. 88% of members say Masterclass has positively impacted their lives, and I think you guys will be no different. I'm confident that taking this class will give you the confidence and insights you need to make better decisions and sharpen your skills. Masterclass right now is offering up to 50% off. Head over to masterclass.com/stayhot to take advantage of this deal. Again, that is masterclass.com/stayhot. Don't miss out on this chance to level up your skills. And remember, always bet responsibly. Sports betting involves risk, and you are responsible for complying with all local laws. I don't know about you, but I'm a huge fan of live events, whether it's a concert, a big game, or even a comedy show. The energy and excitement are unmatched. I still remember the time I went to the Browns game this year, and I got to watch my Browns beat up on the Baltimore Ravens. It was truly an unforgettable experience. That's why I'm always looking forward to making new memories. And Game Time makes it so easy. With Game Time, I'm able to grab tickets for any upcoming event using their new feature, Game Time Picks. It filters out all the extra stuff and only shows you the best deals on amazing seats, so you don't waste time. I found a super deal that was hard to beat, and the best part is you can see seat views before you buy. No surprise fees with all-in pricing, and the lowest price guarantee gives me peace of mind. If I find a cheaper ticket elsewhere, I get 110% back. So, if you want the best deal on your next event, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code BLAIDENK, that's BLAIDENK, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download Game Time today. What is it? Game Time. Theo, what game, or I won't even say what game, what talking point more so do you want to start with?
I don't know. I mean, maybe let's start with Penix's debut.
Sure.
That's the notes I have on hand.
I think it was very much what you would expect. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I thought it was pretty good. I think Penix is going to end up sticking around for a while. It seems like he can get through his reads well, and he can hang in pockets well. Like, he doesn't seem to get very overwhelmed. He's experienced, and it shows. I think the negative from this game is that some of the accuracy issues that you saw in college showed up here. There were a couple of throws that I thought he could have made that he missed. Overall, I'll take what he gave you over what Kirk gave you pretty easily. And this was game one. And I think if Penix can be a good decision maker and a good pocket manager, he can be in the NFL and continue to get reps, be good enough to, like, not get reps because he's, like, young or get reps because you drafted him highly, but get reps because he's good enough to be a starting quarterback, to the point where he can sort of safely or securely build and grow on what he's doing right now. So I thought, if I was a Falcons fan, I thought I'd be decently happy.
Yeah. I think it's a good performance from him. The one thing that I wanted to really see was him not just absolutely killing drives for them the same way that not Matt Ryan, Kirk Cousins did. When Kirk Cousins, it's like either like a bad sack and he didn't take a lot of them, but like when he took them, they were like the worst sacks ever, or it would be just like an ugly interception where
he wouldn't take a bad sack in lieu of a very bad interception.
Right,
because
right, exactly. It would be like a lollipop balloon through the air right into the defender's hand. And like, you didn't see like that kind of stuff on a regular basis. You would see like 3, 4, 5 of those plays a game from Kirk Cousins through the last 5 games that we've seen of him. And so that's what I was wanting to see. And I think not seeing those kind of mistakes is optimistic.
I thought he looked like a vet. Like, I forgot that I was watching a rookie making his first start. He had a really veteran skill set that I thought was impressive. He, like you said, Matt, he went through his reads really well. Like, I saw him get all the way to I think the most I saw him get through was 4, but that's about as many as there is on any given play. So that was one where he went all the way across the field, ended up finding Kyle Pitts, who had like hitched up and then saw it was man. So then he started running away, and then Penix got through his read and kind of found him right as he started accelerating again. That was read 4. Really early in the game, he stepped up and hit a backside dig to Drake London. And there was a defensive tackle who had beaten his guy right in his face, hands up in the air. Penix threw around him, hit London right in stride, like perfectly, like absolute perfect accuracy, exactly where you'd want it. He had a hole shot where the safety came down to run with Bijan Robinson, who was play faking wide zone and then released out into the flat. The safety realized it was play action and then bailed, trying to get to that corner route, but Penix just put it right over his head. I thought the sliding into pressure, right? Not just stepping up into necessarily like a wide open, clean pocket or bailing and running, But like stepping up when there's somebody in his face and throwing, I thought that was super impressive. And you weren't getting that from Kirk, certainly. The pick that he threw wasn't his fault. And a lot of the bad things that happened in this game weren't his fault. Like, it wasn't I know I say it all the time. But it's just true about football that way too much blame and credit goes to the quarterback in any given game. So that's why if you acknowledge that, you'll end up saying, well, it's not his fault a whole lot. But seriously, look at the pick that he threw.
I mean,
the
guy.
And that's why I say, not seeing those kind of like disastrous mistakes, it's good.
Yeah. The first two
do we have the Pitts conversation?
Bro, I don't know what he's on about these days. He had 1,000 yards his rookie year, man. Like, what happened? He was such a good prospect.
2 targets, 1 catch, 7 yards.
But
basically an interception on his stat sheet. I mean,
yeah, it can't be more Pitts' fault than that. But
yeah.
I see what you're saying with the accuracy, Matt. He did have some, like, I think underthrows specifically that he dealt with. I thought the fade to London and the goal line was an underthrow where he just kind of maybe tried to aim it too much and put it like just in the perfect spot instead of just like, dude, just throw it above his head. He's Drake London. Like, he'll go get it. He tried to maybe like kind of doot it in there perfectly, and it just wasn't quite right. I also thought he releases kind of weird. I know he's lefty and he like throws it sidearm. I also think he bends too much in his torso. Like, he'll throw it,
it'll look fine, Theo.
And he'll be like in a C shape, and that I don't love, and I thought resulted in maybe a miss or two today. But overall, I thought throwing away from a DB's leverage, stepping up into pressure, getting through reads, all looked very veteran. He didn't have any crazy out-of-structure plays or anything too jaw-dropping, but he really managed the game super well, I thought, for a rookie making his first start. Like I said, I was like, wait a minute, this is Penix's first start. He hasn't been doing this for 10 years. That's what it looked like to me. He was doing some really advanced stuff.
And the Giants don't have a bad defense either. Okay, they have some good players on their defense.
They do. They do.
I don't know
everything about the Giants.
I don't know what their total defensive EPA is, but I imagine it's not the best in the world.
At one point this season, it wasn't too bad. I don't know if that has held true as this season has completely gone off the rails and will probably result in everybody involved getting fired.
It's in the bottom half of the league for sure.
To be fair, the 34 points that the Falcons put up is slightly deceiving.
True.
Because of maybe some big swings. Although, I mean, I guess you could say the same thing about a bumbled ball going, on the goal line going their way. But
most of the points put up were not Penix. It was Drew Lock handing the football to the defense and them getting taken in for touchdowns. But it was still a nice performance from Penix. And I think he certainly makes the Falcons more dangerous.
Speaking of nice performances from rookies, Philadelphia versus Washington, Daniels put up, 5 touchdowns in this game. Crazy comeback, final play, or not quite final play, but pretty close to final play touchdown in the last 10 seconds. What did you guys think of his performance and overall the game?
Well, before we talk about Jaden Daniels, I will say I want all the Jalen Hurts haters to be quiet. You need him, man. That Eagles offense could have put up 60 today. They scored 33 and they didn't score a single touchdown outside of the first quarter. And one of those was a long Saquon Barkley run. Kenny Pickett did not drive down the field more than one time.
Kenny Pickett, I said this on Blue Sky. You can find me on there. If you took somebody who has never seen football before and you sat them in a chair and you were like, you're going to evaluate quarterbacks today, and you turn on Kenny Pickett, they would come back with the most beautiful, detailed report of all the things he does wrong, knowing nothing about the sport. They'd be like, well, he holds it too long and he's not very accurate. It's just so obvious how bad he is.
Yeah.
That was my kind of takeaway.
Yeah, no, it was.
Yeah,
It was
I mean,
performance.
a lot of it was him throwing it to like AJ Brown, like he's down there somewhere, and it was several, pass interferences on underthrows or AJ Brown making some crazy plays. AJ Brown was really, really good in this game. Lattimore just could not hang with him at all. That fourth down that he picked up where he slipped a guy and then ran for it. I mean, he had some crazy plays in this game. Sometimes you can forget because the Eagles offense has been up and down just how good he is, but he's one of those dudes where he's either a top 5 wide receiver for you, or you got to think like the receiver talent in the league is crazy because he's phenomenal.
It's him chasing Jefferson, man. Those I know CD. I've been slandering CD because I said Drake was close to him, but I really just think those 3 specifically are totally different. I mean,
he only had 97 yards, but like he had more than that if we're counting.
And
it was Pickett, and it was in the pass
DPI doesn't
interference.
count as yards, but also I think that was kind of a weak DPI call.
There were several of them. No, he got like back-to-back ones.
The one I'm talking, like there was one down the right sideline, probably 40 yards down the field, that I thought was really weak. But it is what it is.
He was dominant. They had Marshawn Lattimore and they traded for him like to shut down things like this, and it reminded me of when a team signs PJ Tucker as the LeBron stopper, and there's that meme of
I think about that meme all the time, dude.
I was thinking about that today because Marshawn Lattimore, right? He's the number 1 corner that they need. He was great last week, right? He's legitimately a good pickup for them. I still believe that. It's just no one is the LeBron stopper and no one is the AJ Brown stopper. It's like bringing in, PJ Tucker. He's the AJ Brown is the Giannis of NFL players. Like he seriously, when you consider the talent and like how they win and just the fact that they're too big, too strong, too physical, it really is that. And there is just no one on the planet who can guard AJ Brown one-on-one. And that was just coming to my mind today. The old LeBron stopper memes.
However, this is a lot of talk about the Eagles.
Yes,
for the
Commanders
result.
won this game.
They did, and it was on Jaden Daniels 100%. I mean, Brian Robinson fumbled twice early in the game. They have not been able to run the football in a really long time, and Jaden Daniels is really just putting the team on his back and carrying them. And today wasn't even his best performance, I'd say, because he threw 2 pretty bad picks. But the amount of big plays that he hit, I mean, huge plays. I thought it was a great idea. I mean, the Eagles defense plays quarters, but really, quarters does put a roof on everything. It does build brackets on the number 1s. But also, if you just like run vertically, it can get beat over the top. In ways.
Clearly.
Yeah, clearly. And I think to just not be afraid of the Eagles defense and the umbrella that they have and just be like, Quinion Mitchell, I'm not afraid of you. We're just running it over your head and throwing it over your head. We're just going deep on you guys and we're going to see what you could do. And it worked. It was a good strategy.
It was.
Yeah, I'll be real with you, man. Like, I understand what you're saying, and I agree partially when we talk about how like deep balls down the sideline are overrated in terms of like how much that matters or how difficult they are necessarily for quarterbacks, because they're a throw that like basically everybody has hit. Like almost any quarterback, given enough chances, can hit one of those throws down the sidelines if they're in the NFL, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas there's maybe a lot of quarterbacks out there when you're evaluating dudes where you're like, that guy probably is never going to be able to hit like a really tough hole shot or get over a layer of the defense and make a throw like that into a tight window or whatever. But Jaden Daniels' consistency and accuracy with these deep balls is ridiculous. And I was, not to make this about me, but I feel the same way about Bryce, where it's like, dude, the consistency on those throws and the pinpoint accuracy It's a massive difference maker. And with Daniels, dude, it's not only that he's firing these things into the perfect location, which is a lot of, being able to beat a defense that necessarily isn't like a huge win for just something down the sideline. Hypothetically, you wouldn't expect it to be, but you're still getting it. But on top of that, Daniels doing it under pressure, doing it like as he's getting hit and throwing down there, and still finding a way to get it like, where you would place it if you could freeze time and walk down there. It's an absolute game breaker. He struggled with some stuff maybe layered or over the middle in this game specifically, but when you factor in that he can do that, and you factor in his ability to run the ball, which really showed up, and which I always feel like he pulls out at the best times. He's not only a really great runner necessarily, but he picks his spots really well, and I think that's what elevates him as like a great scrambler. Mm-hmm. He isn't necessarily like the fastest or the strongest guy ever, although he's pretty athletic.
Fast.
He's pretty fast. He's not like necessarily Lamar or like physically imposing like Hurts or Allen, but he's a lot of the athleticism and 110% of the picking his spots. And then he had a pretty nasty juke today as well. So maybe that's not the way they view it.
That was
a crazy one.
That was he was. I think there were 3 people like all closing in on him, and for him to get upright and put his foot in the ground and like get skinny and like crease them like he did.
He's very fluid. He's fluid in a way that maybe a lot of other guys aren't in that sense.
And that's he's
deceptively more physical than I thought coming out of school. Like this was more clear, I think, in the Saints game where he was breaking more tackles, where it looked like he could get wrapped up. It's like, man, he's so skinny that like
he's kind of rubbery.
Yeah, but he's still
more than anything
to like slip through.
It's a different running. So many players have like different running styles. I agree. He is kind of like stronger, maybe not in the sense that he's going to go just like plow through you like an Allen or a Jalen Hurts or whatever. Mm-hmm. But he's frustrating to bring down, especially for a guy his size. And then you factor in, his overall accuracy most of the time, and his ability to like, what he's done under pressure for the most part. Again, he had a couple of tough plays in this one, but overall, I thought it was a really good performance by him.
His touchdown was over the middle between 2 safeties. Yep. I don't know what happened to Bond. That's the kind of play he's been making all year, is carrying those crossers an absurd length down the field, but just fell off of it for some reason a little bit here, and then Jaden Daniels put it right on the money. My thing with go balls as well, I do think they're an overrated thing for quarterbacks, although obviously if you can hit them at the level Jaden hits them at, that is a huge positive. But part of the reason I think it's an overrated quarterback throw has to do with the fact that I think it's an underrated wide receiver catch. Like quarterbacks on goes,
that's very true.
They're throwing it to a spot, and either the wide receiver tracks it and makes the right catch for the moment, or he does not. And like one of the go balls he threw today to McLaurin is like having one of those plays where he's looking up into the sky backwards, tracking it over his shoulder and like looking it into his hands, and he's better than anybody at that exact thing. So to have wide receivers who can track the ball like that, on top of, the fact that he's never throwing it out of bounds, the fact that he's always giving them a chance to do that, is, it's the biggest play there is basically in football, and he's extremely good at hitting it, and the receivers are very good at catching and tracking it.
Yeah, I think a lot of those where it's like you kind of have a lot of room for error on those go balls, because so much of it is the receiver adjusting and making the play. And it's like, there's obviously good and bad there, but a lot of the work is on the receiver, no matter how well you throw it. But you can also not throw it that well, and the expectation is that the receiver is the one who goes and makes the play. I think with a guy like Daniels, obviously I agree McLaurin is, well suited, and that connection, that combination is fantastic. It's a great wide receiver quarterback duo just based off of their skill sets. But I think with Daniels, it's like he throws those where it's like he isn't relying on the receiver as much, and these are just really great throws, and they are exactly where you'd want them to be, and it's not the receiver doing as much work on average. So it's a game changer. It is.
Yeah,
100%.
He does all the good stuff that he did in college. He's doing in the NFL. On top of, there were concerns that we had about, if his scrambling would be like in opportune moments at the right time. And like you said, Matt, he's picking his spots really well, and that was something that we weren't super sure if he was going to do at the NFL level, because he played behind such a good behind such a good offensive line at LSU. So it was just like we never really got to see him under pressure, and now it's when he's been faced with pressure, he's done a good job of managing it. He's still been accurate. He's, been scrambling, looking to throw, as well as taking off to run when he needs to. He's been their whole run game through the last few their last few stretch of games. Like he's doing everything right at this point. Again, I think I would still give the Offensive Rookie of the Year to Bowers, but Daniels makes a very good case for it, I think, at this point.
Yeah, I think Daniels is deserving. I'll have to look at more Bowers stuff, but I could see
he had.
That's also
just shy of 100 yards today. He had just shy of 100 yards today. Good performance.
I mean, he's an absolute beast, but it will be Daniels who wins it, and I'm not mad at that at all.
Tight end.
I also want to shout out the Washington defense a little bit. I know it was Mickey. I know they were getting shredded at the beginning, and I know Kenny Pickett came in, and that is a little sketchy. However, they did stop Barkley for the remaining 3 quarters, and since week 10, they are 15th in defensive DVOA, or not DVOA, EPA. And, it's been a long time since week 10, and that's not a great number, but it's average. How long have we been saying, they ranked 32nd?
Their defense is disaster.
They ranked 32nd. Yep. They ranked 32nd. 2.5 years at least. We were saying that from, 2021 to halfway through the season. Recently, it's been a lot better, and they did managed to shut down Saquon for the remaining 3 quarters. So they're dangerous. This was their first win against a playoff team. Again, there isn't a Kenny Pickett asterisk that comes with that. But they still had an MVP candidate on offense. They still had Saquon, and they still had A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and that offensive line. Like, it's a very easy environment for Kenny Pickett to succeed if the defense doesn't step up. But they didn't. They made some plays. That Louvu Lurk, come on. That was crazy.
How much is he? It's just sick the Panthers couldn't keep him. It's just
supposedly this Eagles offense is super easy to operate in, but
that was a nice lurk, man. It would have gotten me too. Not that matters, but
let's just hope Jalen Hurts gets right, because this Eagles team would struggle in the playoffs without him.
Not with Tanner McKee, baby. No,
Tanner McKee. No, they need to get him back. He went into concussion protocol, but I'm not sure where he stands as of right now. Impact. He has the run game, obviously. The impact to the pass game, but we'll see. You've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? Wendy's new saucy nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo, honey barbecue, garlic parm, or if you're really a heat seeker, try spicy ghost pepper, only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. I dare ya. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's gotta be Wendy's at participating U.S. Wendy's locations. Other game that we need to talk about is Vikings and Seahawks, and this will kind of tie into the discussion on the NFC West, because the Rams look like they're going to end up winning this division, which I don't know if any of us, I don't think any of us predicted it, but I don't know if
I said they'd come in last.
I was about to say, I don't know how low any of us really were on them. it's really, I want to, maybe we can talk about that after this game. The Vikings beat the Seahawks. It looked like Geno was gonna pull it out and win this game for them, but this Vikings defense made the play at the end. Jefferson's an absolute beast. How dangerous do the Vikings look right now? 13-2, just beat a pretty good Seahawks team, given Geno's been dealing with his knee injury. But I think the Vikings have to be considered a pretty scary team to face in the playoffs also. We talk about the Eagles, talk about the Lions. The Vikings are no slouch.
I mean, they're pretty intimidating. The skill position group that they have is just no joke. It's as good as there is in the league. It's as good as maybe there's ever been in the league, to be completely honest with you, when you consider that Jefferson is an all-timer. Addison has developed into as good of a number 2 as you can be. Like, Hawkinson is pretty reliable. Like, it's just a good setup. Even Naylor, is a good third guy for them this year. Legend. Aaron Jones can catch the ball. It's difficult to deal with, and Sam Darnold has been, maybe the best quarterback, pushing it past the sticks this season.
He's letting that thing fly, and it's fantastic. And I mean, look, he still has his mistakes, certainly, but honestly, they're really not that crazy common. It's not like he's having some sort of Jameis season, no?
No.
I mean, this is mostly really good stuff. And it would be one thing if maybe he was like Goffy, which I don't want to make that like a huge insult, but it would be one thing if it was like, okay, well, the pocket's like perfectly clean. He's just sort of sitting in there and like it's just easy and just like throwing up like 50-50 stuff, and Jefferson's just that good. But a lot of it is him like climbing the pocket and throwing on the move and hitting guys down the field and throwing into tight windows. Like, it's easy when you have Jefferson and Addison to some extent. Like if he was playing on Carolina still, yeah, he wouldn't have the numbers that he does right now. But like, he's been legitimately just good. He just has been, regardless of who his weapons are. And his style as somebody who is this aggressive fits really well with an offense that needs somebody to be aggressive and would be held back by anybody who was any level of conservative. So, I mean, I don't know how you can view the Vikings as anything other than a serious threat in the NFC. They might not be your actual favorite, but Detroit's super banged up. I mean,
yeah.
With the Eagles' loss today, the Vikings are they playing for the 1 seed against the Lions when they play them next?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay. So my take is that the 1 seed probably could make it out of the NFC potentially.
100%. I mean, it's a good team build, man. Their passing game is really high octane. They create a ton of havoc on defense. They have the formula you're looking for: defense, head coach, quarterback. It's not a bad trio of things that they've got there. Plus their auxiliary things that aren't part of that formula, which, matter maybe not just as much as those three, but like the skill position being as good as it is, the offensive line being, as solid as it's been even post Darisaw injury.
They lost Darisaw and they've held up pretty good. A lot of people thought that would be disastrous for their season, getting Darnold under more pressure, but they've been fine.
It's funny that their GM has not had a good draft in his career, Kwesi, but like kills it in free agency and trades. Like, that's just a weird way to build a team that's this good, but I guess, hey, if it works, it works. Here is every quarterback to win at least 13 games in their first season with a team in NFL history. Here we go. This is from Andrew Kramer, again on Blue Sky. The 2016 Dallas Cowboys had Dak, the Broncos, Peyton Manning, Steve McNair with the Ravens, Ben Roethlisberger with the Steelers, Earl Morrall with the Colts, and Daryl LaMonica with the Raiders. Those two were back in 68 and 67. Yeah. Pretty illustrious list there that Sam Darnold is joining. I really don't have too much analysis on that. Just that it's going to be hard to let him go after this year. I guess that's
that's what I was thinking of. I'm somebody who's on the train of like, you drafted a guy, you're playing him, right? Like You're going for the top end stuff. And I'm wearing the OSU cap, so I can't give a real opinion about this, I guess. Okay, go ahead.
If you want to move on from Sam Darnold for the high end stuff, but the high end stuff you have behind him is QB5 in this draft. Like, how high end really is that? It's not like Caleb Williams is sitting on the bench, right? Like, JJ McCarthy is doing this, 13 wins, stepping up and hitting that back shoulder throw to Jefferson with the half field safety closing in. It's like JJ isn't that insane of a prospect. I mean, so many quarterbacks went above him.
That's what I don't necessarily think that JJ can't be like developed into a good player. Like, I think he's clearly got tools worthy of an NFL quarterback. He's super young too, which means that he's going to have a lot of time to develop, even though he's injured this year. Like, if he turned into a good quarterback, like, it wouldn't shock me. But I don't know if there's like a clear like superpower that he's going to have necessarily, right? I mean, like, he's not some sort of Josh Allen type of guy or Caleb Williams or even like a Drake May sort of dude. And if that's the case, it's like, what is the best case scenario for McCarthy, and how much better is it than Darnold right now, and how much more likely is it than how you're getting, what you're getting out of Darnold right now? I think, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to keep Darnold, but there are questions you got to ask yourself a little bit here, because like, Darnold is playing like really, really good football, and the odds, let's put it this way. Average first round draft pick quarterback is not as good as Darnold is right now. Average median guy doesn't get this good.
And Darnold was a third overall pick who is now like hitting his ceiling.
He's got the tools too,
Right. Like, JJ, maybe he does hit the ceiling, but he's a 10th overall pick hitting his ceiling. That probably is about like the same as Darnold. Like, once you've got this in your hand, Darnold, like, do you really want to try to let it go? Because he is making really high end throws for weeks now. I mean, starting the Cardinals game, all the intermediate layered shots that he hit under pressure. I mean, he is no Tua in this Kevin O'Connell scheme. Right. Like, he can hold the ball, and he can maneuver, and he can, make things happen. It's been happening for weeks now. Now, he's had his slip ups this year. The game against the Jets was really quite bad earlier this season. So, like, maybe they stumble down the stretch versus the Lions. There's some disaster. In the playoffs, there's some disaster. I think quarterbacks are probably getting paid too much right now on average. And if you can, maybe you have an excuse, even as good as Darnold is, to like just not pay him that. Like, maybe that's tempting, especially if he really stumbles down the stretch. I can see the world where it still works out for JJ in Minnesota, but man, there is just certainly no guarantee that JJ is better than Darnold. Like, there is just no.
This is the conversation that we had a couple weeks ago, right? Is, you're going to have to make a decision at the end of this season as to, like, whether or not you bring Darnold back. And I don't think it's as easy as, well, we drafted this guy and now we have to play him. It does come down to what Darnold wants to get paid. And I think if, we can talk about what that number is. But yeah, I do think it's a conversation that the Vikings need to have, and I think I would bring back Darnold, depending on what the price is. I would bring him back, because then you get to do kind of the Aaron Rodgers, Alex Smith thing, where you get to let your quarterback sit for a long time. McCarthy's young. Like, what's the worst? What's the worst? Like, if your quarterback is good now, why stop that? And if he starts being bad, okay, then you can put McCarthy in. But you get to do the thing that the Falcons were trying to do.
Yeah, I think part of it, like, first off, it's tough because you have to let Darnold walk if you're going to do that without seeing JJ McCarthy at all. You don't get to see a single snap from him in the regular season. And your team right now is fighting for the 1 seed. And if he is not good right away, if he struggles out the gate, like that's going to be very frustrating to the fan base. It's going to be very frustrating to the team. And it's going to be kind of disappointing because windows are not that big in the NFL, you know? But additionally, like you compare it to the Kirk Cousins deal. That's what we did not that long ago. I feel like we were talking about this like maybe 2 episodes ago or whatever. Mm-hmm. And like, yeah, they drafted a guy because they wanted to find somebody who they could hang on to long term and like hit big with. Like that's the end goal. That's the high value play. Like, right. But it's not the same. It's not the same as Kirk Cousins at all. Kirk Cousins was 36 years old coming off an Achilles injury. Paying Kirk Cousins wouldn't have been a disaster because Kirk Cousins is only pretty good and you're paying him top dollar and like that's not the greatest value play. Kirk Cousins would have been a disaster signing because Kirk Cousins is like no longer good and your long-term future with him, it just isn't there because of his age. With Darnold, he's playing the best football of his career. It is only 1 year and you should be cautious off of only one season. But if you believe that he can continue this level of play, he's 27 years old. He could play for another decade if things were like, you know, in his best case scenario. He could be your long-term answer at quarterback if he's playing at this level. Of course, depending on the price. But I think that does make it an interesting and a different decision than what they did with Kirk.
Yeah, that would the one thing that would concern me is that it's only 1 year. And if you take the collection of Sam Darnold's career, it is more bad than good. And so that's
true, but there's a clear upward path here that you're seeing. So it's a little bit different. But regardless, it is only 1 year. Yeah.
So that would be the one thing that would concern me. But he's been playing well. So I would keep him. I would keep him around if the price was right. I don't know quite what that number is. It's probably it's definitely south of 50, maybe south of 40.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But as far as Seattle goes, they are struggling right now. They've now lost 2 straight after they had just retaken the NFC West or taken the NFC West, taken first place in that, and now they lose last week, they lose this week. The Rams get another win. They are starting to really put themselves in the driver's seat for this division. And that's another team that feels really dangerous in the playoffs. You talk about good coach, good quarterback, good weapons. They've got not a great defense, but they've got some good players on their defense. We really like their defensive line this year. I mean, what does their outlook look like at this point?
Well, one question I've got is about Reek Woolen's future there, who is so frustrating.
And that's the number one. That's the number one thing that I'm thinking of. Tyreek Woolen has been really bad. He's been really. Now it's against Justin Jefferson, but did we say something about it last week? Like he had a really bad game too. It's incredibly noticeable, and I think that's been tough for Seattle because not that long ago that the idea was that they were going to have like a super dope, super young cornerback room. Like that was going to be one of the biggest strengths of their team. And with Woolen out there, like it just isn't at all.
He has no dog in him, I'm afraid. It just with him noticeably so, when there's a time to be physical, when there's a time to step to the ball and catch it, when there's a time to make a tackle, it just doesn't really happen with him. He suffers from frequent mental lapses. He's just got so much ability. He's so elastic. His arms are so long and so disruptive. And he's even made some really high-end plays this year. Like, it flashes, and there was even a stretch where I was like, oh, he's starting to string some good games together. Like, and then it collapses again, and he doesn't start this game. They bench him for the beginning, and then they bring him in, and he struggles. And that's a big piece of their defense that's failing right now. Like, they've fixed their linebacking core in the middle of the season. I don't know how they did it, but they did. Leonard Williams has been, a monster. Byron Murphy had a nice play in this game, but then it was called back because of a face mask. That could have changed things. Like, there is a lot to like about this team, but just it's not good enough on defense. It just hasn't been consistent at multiple levels over the course of the year. Sometimes the secondary is playing great. Sometimes the defensive line has been playing great. Sometimes the linebackers have been playing great this year, but at other times this year, it just hasn't all come together at the same time for them. and we'll see if that gets better in the future. And then 17 pressures allowed today versus 7 for the Vikings. How about that? Yeah,
it was bad. I didn't realize it was that bad.
Yeah, it was that bad. Here's your thing with Darnold, though. How about this? 17 pressures allowed for the Seahawks, 2 sacks taken. 7 pressures allowed for the Vikings, 4 sacks taken. If there is an issue with Darnold, that is your problem. But
shout out Gino, very man. True. Bad knee.
But Gino didn't.
But he also did throw. He also did make a couple really bad throws.
He did. And then,
I don't know with Darnold. I don't know. It's a very tough decision.
It is a very tough decision.
We've talked about it to death recently, and we also kind of talked about the Seahawks to death. I think we should hit on the whole Broncos situation if you guys want to move on to that.
Let's do it.
It's incredibly interesting. I've got a lot of buddies who are tracking that right now, obviously, because the Bengals are still in play. And a couple of weeks ago, it was like down to basically you need this exact set of circumstances to play out for them. And 2 weeks later, all of a sudden, the circumstances that the Bengals need to play out for them are like win and you need 2 losses to help you. And that's it. Because Denver has not been able to take care of business recently when they're just 1 win away. Although I guess they did beat the Colts, but that was also good for the Bengals. I've been viewing this from the Bengals' perspective, being completely honest. So what do you guys think is going to happen with this for the rest of the season? How do you see it playing out?
Their defense is still great, so it's hard to say for sure, but this was kind of my concern with the Broncos, is that their final stretch of games was not a cakewalk. So, and the teams that are right behind them trying to get into the playoffs have more favorable schedules. Like we saw the Colts put an absolute beating on the Titans until they started to come back randomly. I stopped watching after it was like 38-7. But right. But coming up next, right? You watch this from the Bengals perspective. The Broncos have the Bengals, and then they have the Chiefs. Like, they have arguably the best offense, one of the best offenses in football right now. Joe Burrow's been playing at an elite level. Today against the Browns, he hit an absolutely ridiculous, like, laying flat on the ground
that was
throw.
Wild.
Like, I mean, we talk, like, Mahomes. Like, that is Mahomes in the Super Bowl against the Buccaneers. Like, he did that, but not sideways. He did it front facing, which is probably even harder. And they've got Jamar and they've got T. Like, that's going to be a really tough game. And I don't know if the Broncos are going to be able to win that one, man. Like, if this gets into a shootout, is Bo Nix going to be able to survive a shootout?
Well, is the Bengals defense going to be able to get a stop? That's really the way that you've got to look at it, because Nix has put up good numbers against bad defenses before. I don't disagree with you. It's like, I'm not saying that I think the Broncos are complete frauds or anything, because their defense is awesome. And when you can get going even against bad defenses, like there's bad offenses that can't do that. I think the Broncos are more limited than bad necessarily. But hypothetically, you look at their resume of wins right now: Colts, Browns, Raiders, Falcons, Panthers, Saints, Raiders, Jets, Buccaneers. It's like they haven't beaten anybody too formidable yet. Buccaneers is not a bad win. Falcons, they really blew out. Like, they're winning some of the games, and they're close against good teams and other times, but you can definitely see how they get a tough stretch at the end and they kind of stumble. I think one thing that'll really save them, outside of the fact that I think they've just got a very good shot against the Bengals, and that's going to be a good matchup, because Burrow's playing the best football of his career pretty much. He'd be MVP or have a real good shot at it if the Bengals were anything
make the playoffs,
this year.
There will be a discussion to be had.
I just don't. He's just been out of. I think he's been out of it for too long to really have a good shot at it. And Allen and Lamar are just so good this year as well. But it's not his fault. I think what also Denver might get lucky with here is the Chiefs might not be trying in their last game. That's the big.
Yeah.
Because they might have the 1 seed locked up. If they can beat Pittsburgh, they'll have no reason to play a Mahomes who's already a little banged up, and they might get Carson Wentz and win it that way.
Yeah, I think the Broncos are still my pick to win here because
I mean, they're
again, maybe they haven't beat anybody that tough. The Bengals aren't that tough. All right, that's why they're in this situation.
True.
And as good as Joe Burrow is, he's not the whole team. And the Broncos just put up 27 points on a good Chargers defense. And Bo Nix had the lowest average depth of target of the year, damn near. I think Bryce may have had a younger one, not a younger one, a lower one versus these very same Chargers. So, I mean, this run game is no joke. I think, Bo Nix, he has had, big performances against bad defenses in the past. I am very worried about the Bengals defense versus Sean Payton and Bo Nix. And I think they could get carved up, and they've got so many legit good players on their D. The Broncos do. I mean, Surtain, it seems like they found something
in the NFL. Yeah.
They found something in Abrams Drain, like Zach Allen. He had a big game against the Chargers. They've got Benito. He was kind of held in check, but could he just speed under Orlando Brown, and sack Burrow and get a strip sack and change the game? He probably could. I'm still thinking Broncos here. And even if the Chiefs are trying January 5th, I mean, they were they had the Chiefs on the ropes the first time they played. And it was...
But other teams have had
insert team was really close to beating the Chiefs, bro. Please, bro, you have to believe me, bro.
This is at home. This is week 18 playoffs. On the line,
I don't
they were this close. I think both of these games are winnable for the Broncos. I think they're a good, complete team. I really do like them in this game. I wish the running game kind of showed up in the second half. There was a toss out to Mims that got fumbled. Just some first early down negatives.
I'm noticing Audric Estime starting to get some juice, man.
Maybe not.
Yeah, I think he led the team in carries.
He did.
He wasn't getting carries at the start of the year. This is good player winning out. It's wonderful to see.
It is wonderful.
He had some really nice cuts and runs and vision and the spinning off tackles. He looked good.
I could be wrong, but to me, he looks like he slimmed down a little bit since Notre Dame. He looks a little
that or
bit...
the players are bigger around him.
It could it could also be that, but I don't know what his actual weight is, but he just looks a little bit slimmer, a little bit leaner. And I think that shows up you're right in smooth cuts and whatnot.
Yeah.
But he was smooth at Notre Dame too. I thought he was a really good back. I will say this. Right, as good as the Broncos defense is, they let up 41 to Baltimore, and they only scored 10 in that game when Baltimore's defense was notoriously playing its worst football of the season. Probably they had just let up 29 points to the Browns. Not a good stretch they were going through. This game could go either way, really. Broncos and Bengals. I think there's a very real shot that the Bengals just come out swinging. And the Bengals defense, I know they played Dorian Thompson-Robinson, but I thought the game plan that they had, that they had lined up for it was pretty good.
Every game plan works against a terrible quarterback. There's no way.
I hate to be a jerk. I liked him in the preseason too. I did. He is terrible, man.
You can play cover 1 and it works against Dorian. You can play cover 4 and it works against Thompson Rob. You can play cover 3. Man, you can blitz. They drop
blitzed,
8.
They blitzed the whole game. They blitzed
because the quarterback can't play. Blitz.
But the pressure got home. And so I wonder if they start trying to just send a lot of pressure at Bo Nix. And maybe that gets it going for him.
Yeah.
Try and get the ball out of his hands really quick, force him to make some mistakes.
But that's what he likes to do.
He likes to get the ball out. He can. Sometimes he holds it too long, but when it's time to just move, he can do it.
Where do they rank against?
I don't know. I think the Broncos will end up pulling it out as well. But it is certainly they do not have it locked up like I thought they did. They very much are at a threat. The Bengals could get them in a shootout, absolutely, and the Steelers could beat the Chiefs and they could go up against the Chiefs and lose again. The weirdest outcome would be the Colts actually being the team to make it because
I'm still confused as that. Wait, okay. Here's the thing. I'm still confused as to how the Colts are in it because they lost to Denver, so Denver should have the tiebreaker over them. Am I wrong?
But it wouldn't matter because it would be a 3-way tie. I think that's the idea.
It would be a 3-way tie.
Right?
Oh. Is that...
The Bengals need the Colts to lose a game. That I know for a fact.
If the Colts win out and the Broncos lose out, the Colts are in.
They would have the same record, though. Am I wrong?
But it is a 3-way tie.
They would have the same record. So I guess the Colts also need the Bengals to win out to make it a 3-way tie, and then I think the tiebreakers are different than head-to-head.
Okay, Colts win. Hold on. Colts win. Broncos lose. That alone does not get the Colts in, is what I'm seeing. But
yeah, Cincinnati
needs to win out. The Bengals also beat the Steelers in Week 18.
It goes to a 3-way, and then it just because the Bengals would have head-to-head on Denver, and Denver would have head-to-head on the Colts. And the Colts don't have head-to-head on the Bengals, but it doesn't matter. It's like you have to find another way to do it, I guess. And then it's like, I think it's like, it might be AFC record that would get them. I'm not really sure. Or maybe in-division record.
Miami could win out as well. And if the Colts win out and Broncos lose out, that could also do it.
That would be awesome.
It would be
the Colts being in would be hilarious.
Would be so awesome for me personally, and nobody else. And everybody else can watch him attempt 11 passes and complete 5 of them.
And then it'd be like
just savoring.
It'd be like, Clat. Maybe there are too many NFL. Wow, that's the thing about that.
Right
that's the thing about that take is like
a broken clock can be right twice a day.
We could shrink the point.
It almost is too many. It really is.
That's not the point he's trying to make.
No.
Let's go down to.
But yeah, I think the Broncos will still make it.
Yeah, I mean they're like 90% odds to make it right now. I mean
they just have more paths than everybody else.
Yeah,
that's just the reality of it.
Yep. There's a reason why they are the favorite in this situation. But unless you guys have anything else, I think that pretty much does it. But
not for me.
If you're wondering why we're a little bit less sleepy on this episode, it's because we're not recording at 2 a.m. We decided that it wasn't worth watching or wasn't worth reporting on Buccaneers Cowboys, and decided to record.
Maybe it'll end up being. But
I am
so much else to talk about that we got through it.
Yeah, we can talk about the NFC South in another episode because it's going to start getting pretty close between them and the Falcons if Penix keeps playing well. The Cowboys are up 20-14 right now, closing in on halftime. So if the Buccaneers lose this game, they'll have the same record. It'll come down to the wire in that division also. But yeah, we can talk about that on a future episode. Thank you all so much for tuning in to another episode of Stay Hot. And as always, from your 3 favorite fellas, we'll catch you on the flippity flop.